Welcome back to Mills and Chill. I know it's been a little while, but we're going to dive straight into Chapter 5 today. First of all, thank you everybody for tuning in once more, and don't forget to check out the original source material by Cara Lockwood and published by Mills and Boon Publishing House. Well, let's get into Chapter 5. Jenna felt like she'd been kicked hard in the stomach. All the air whooshed out of her lungs as the room let out a collective gasp of shock and disappointment. The women all looked heartbroken. At least Jenna wasn't the only one. Although that knowledge just made her feel worse. The men in the room looked sad too, because everyone knew that Jack, as the marketing director, was an amazing producer. He could land the impossible clients with a wink and a smile. He could sell snow to a polar bear, and everyone knew it. But all Jenna could think was, I've been played. Of course. He could sleep with her and say anything he wanted. He was leaving the country. Jenna felt hurt and angry all at once, even though part of her knew she had no right to be. What did she expect? A diamond? You drunk texted your boss by mistake for a hookup, and he came running. It didn't mean that he wanted anything more than to scratch an itch. Isn't that what you wanted too? Still, she watched Jack gather up his notes and hoped to catch his eye, but he stubbornly refused to make eye contact with her. It was as if the night before had never happened. Of course it had. She was a big girl. She could handle it, she told herself. Then why did she suddenly feel like crying? Jack sat in his office brooding, trying to concentrate on work and failing. He'd seen the pain in Jenna's face when he'd made the announcement, and it had made him feel lousy. He was acting like a boy with a schoolyard crush, and there really wasn't any excuse. He knew Jax had called right then, in the middle of the board meeting, and he just lost it. It hadn't been his finest hour, he knew. He'd blurted out the news about his job offer just because he'd let jealousy get to him. His phone buzzed in his pocket. His sister Maeve was calling. It was 7 p.m. back in Ireland. His do-everything sister would have commuted home to a family and by now was probably clearing away dinner plates. Jack, did you remember Maggie's birthday? Of course you didn't, so that's why I'm calling. Maeve's accent was thicker than Jack's, which had been steadily waning since his time in Chicago. You're quiet, Jack. Too quiet. What's wrong? You're in love again, ain't you? Maeve's disappointment blanketed him like an itchy wool sweater, the effect not dulled by being bounced off a satellite cellular line across the Atlantic Ocean. No, he lied badly. Just having girl trouble. Aye, Jack, you're always having trouble with the lasses. What's the problem with this one, eh? You buy a diamond on the second date? Well, we haven't had a second date, he admitted. Or even technically a date at all, he thought, but didn't say. Lord, Jack, you'd be the death of me. I swear it. Why don't you just use lasses like all the other blokes do? Well, because I'm a nice guy. A hopeless romantic, more like. Should I pretend to be something I'm not? Come on, Maeve. You know I can't do that. Jack twirled a pencil absently on his desk. He glanced at the ad on the floor and saw Jenna return from the copy room. He watched her go, admiring her shapely legs as they walked by. You're right. Best be who you are, and hope you find someone else crazy as you are. Jack heard clatter in the background as Maeve's little toddler girl, Catherine, clambered through. Ah, the wee one is busting out the pots and pans again. She's going to be a drummer in a band, I bet on it. Jack grinned, glancing at the picture of his little nieces on his desktop, which was already littered with photos of his sisters and their families. He felt a little ache every time he glanced at their beaming faces, because that's what he wanted, too. A family. A safe home base. What was wrong with that? He saw Jenna stalk past the windows of his office without glancing over at him. Apparently, the city of Chicago. Quite a lot. I was hoping you'd be married before you came back home, Maeve admitted. I don't want you stalking around all the lasses around here. Especially when you come work for me. We have a strict anti-dating policy at our company, and for good reason, Jack. Managers shouldn't take advantage of their employees, and in your case, employees shouldn't take care of Shouldn't take advantage of their managers. Well, I guess they should take care. No one's taking advantage of me, Jack said. So she is someone who works for you. I thought she might be. That Jenna lass you've been mooning over? Jack realized his sister had caught him in a trap. It was what she always did. She fished for information without you even knowing she was fishing. Then before you could blink, she discovered everything. Yes, Jack said, sighing. Well, there was no use in denying it now. So, HR be damned, what's the roadblock? She's got an ex-boyfriend she's hung up on. Then you're in luck. No messy office romance for you. You go and scare off the ex, and you'll be in for a world of trouble, Jack. But maybe it was just the kind of trouble he wanted, you thought. Maybe the answer was obvious. He needed to muscle out his competition. If there was one thing he never shied away from, it was a challenge. Jenna sleepwalked through the rest of the workday, trying to keep herself together. It was one of those afternoons when she wished she was back in college, when she could ditch out of class and just spend the day in bed. God, sometimes she really, really hated being a grown-up. Sometimes it felt like she knew all of the answers but none of the rules. Does it get any easier? When is my love life ever not going to be a mess? She watched Jack as he went about his day, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. She admired his ability to not let anything affect him. Watched him move easily through the office, his sexy stubble leading the way. You'd think he spent the night sleeping, not up with her doing X-rated things. Jen had wondered how often he'd done this. Stayed up all night in bed with someone he worked with, only to waltz in to work looking refreshed, nothing amiss. Maybe this was his MO. It was easier to think of him as a grade-A jerk. It made the projection easier. The I'm leaving the country to get away from you thing better. Jax called twice more, and Jenna almost felt like throwing a phone out the window. Now he was interested? Now that Jack was in the picture? Jenna counted the minutes until the end of the day, and wanted nothing more than to head directly to the closest bar and drink herself into oblivion. But that's how you got into this mess in the first place. That smug little voice in her head reminded her. But at this time, no texting under the influence. Hell, no texting at all. At 6 sharp, Jen had begun to gather up her things, ready to book it out of the office. She'd only just shrug on her coat, when a long shadow fell across her desk. She looked up to see Jack Kearney, standing there. He'd thrown on a leather bomber jacket, his broad shoulders filling it out nicely. His jet black hair rolled off his forehead in waves she wanted to run her fingers through. His sharp blue eyes watched her intently. His mouth in that sensual half-smile that she remembered so well from the night before. Instantly her body responded, her stomach feeling like the gooey, warm center of some expensive dessert, and she forgot all the reasons why she was supposed to be angry. A man's eyes were not supposed to be that blue. Jenna, I think we need to talk. That didn't sound good. Jenna snapped out of the trance she'd been in, and staring into those amazing eyes, she tried to get her bearings once more. He wanted to talk, after dropping that bombshell in the meeting? Jenna glanced around the office, which had mostly cleared out. No one was in the immediate eavesdropping range. No, we don't. With great effort, Jenna looked down, away from those blue eyes. It took all the force of will not to gaze at his face with a look like a love-struck idiot. She did her best to look unaffected, but as she stuffed papers into her bag, her hands shook. You don't owe me an explanation. Oh, but you do. You really do, she was thinking to herself. Jenna. His voice sounded pained, and when she looked up and met his eyes, she saw a riot of emotions there. Maybe he was worried that she'd tell Pam in HR, or maybe he was just concerned she'd go all crazy stalker X after a single night with him. Whatever the case, she knew when a man was attempting to damage control. Jax did it all the time. You don't have to worry about me, Jenna said. It was fun night, right? That's all. The words hurt her to say, she realized. And a beat too late, it occurred to her at that moment that Jack had said, I could see us together. She could too. What was wrong with her? She'd never felt this, She never felt this way this fast. It took months and months before she felt that way about Jack. Or Jax. A fun night, Jack repeated. But his voice sounded a little stilted. Jenna whipped a bag over her shoulder, and then hurried away before she lost her cool. Before she started yelling, or worse, crying. I'm not going to be that psychotic crazy woman in the office. That will not be me. She walked quickly to the elevators, and just managed to get into an open one to the floor. She saw Jack standing there, still at her desk, watching her with those eyes that missed nothing as the elevator doors slid shut. She nearly slumped against the wall, but abruptly realized she wasn't alone in the elevator. Pam was standing right next to her. Pam, the head of UHR, made it a purpose in life to do all she could to dot the I's and cross the T's, even if that meant being a huge pain in the butt to everyone else. She was the only one who always told the managers they needed to include more negative feedback on their performance reviews. Nobody liked Pam. Tough day? She asked, her squinty eyes giving Jenna a once-over. Fine, just busy. Jenna responded quickly as she straightened her posture and felt like tucking in her shirt. It's good to be busy. The idle remark sounded more like an accusation, which is the tone Pam used for everything. Jenna was almost tempted to tell Pam the truth. The shock on her face would be enough reward, although, once she recovered, Pam would be in sexual harassment heaven. Jenna didn't want to give her the satisfaction. The ground floor couldn't come fast enough as Jenna hurried into the lobby. She skidded to a halt near the glass doors, however, as she saw the sudden autumn downpour outside, the hard rain drenching the sidewalk. Jenna didn't have an umbrella, or even a coat with a hood. Pam, ever prepared, and always one to brag about it, popped open a fold-out umbrella from her purse. See you tomorrow, she chirped. She slid out the doors into the deluge. Jenna stood there, staring out into the rain as it poured down. The one stop sat 2 blocks away. If she ran, maybe she'd only get marginally drenched. She pulled out a manila folder from her bag, emptied its contents into the side pocket on her purse, and then folded it open above her head. It would have to do. She braced herself for the autumn chill as she pushed out of the revolving doors. The rain crashed down on the folder, and she hadn't made it 4 steps before the folder destroyed in a soggy, dripping mess. She maneuvered away through the sea of umbrellas, as everyone but her seemed to be prepared for the rain. Damn weather app on her phone, it didn't say anything about this. By the time she reached the light, the folder had disintegrated, melting away, gooey chunks of paper down on her head until it finally gave away, splitting straight in the middle and letting the downpour in. She ducked under a nearby restaurant awning for shelter, cursing. Water seeped into the toes of her boots, and she shivered as the cold, wet rain sank into a not quite warm enough wool blazer. She tucked a scarf closer around her neck, but there would be no fighting off this chill, as she could already feel it seeping into her bones. Her breath came out in agitated white puffs as the temperature around her dropped. Frigid rain, her best and least favourite weather. She huddled under the awning, considering hiding out in the restaurant behind her, its glaring neon signs advertising lunch specials, but she wasn't in the mood for gyro at the moment, though at this rate she might not have a choice. But then a sleek silver BMW slid to a stop near the curb. The driver flashed the lights and he honked, and Jenna moved around, wondering who he was here to pick up. She didn't know anyone who drove such an expensive car. The passenger side window rolled down, and that was when she saw Jack grinning at her. "Come on, lass, I'll give you a ride," he shouted, his brogue just barely carrying over the thunderous rain. Her body leaned forward towards him and his dry car, but she realized she was supposed to be angry. "I'm fine," she countered, even as the rain fell in sheets down by the awning's edges. She wasn't fine. She was stuck in a tiny 4x6 bit of the curb barely covered by a canvas awning until the rain relented. "You're not fine," he disagreed. "Come on, get in." "Is that an order?" she asked him dubiously. "Consider it a strong suggestion," he said, and leaned over so he could open the door. She shifted in her wet boots, the cold damp sinking into her toes and making them feel even colder. Why was she cutting off her nose to spite her face? Why not take a ride from him, and then be on her way? She was a grown-up. She ought to be able to handle sitting in a car with him. They'd had sex, so what? She scurried over to his waiting car, sliding into the warm leather seats. Everything inside appeared pristine, neat as a pin, down to the rivets in his floor mats, and Jenna hated dripping muddy water on them. She almost opened her mouth to apologize, but stopped herself. Why not make a mess of his car? He probably wasn't going to take it to Dublin, now was he? Thanks, she managed to grit out. Anyway, it was nice of him to give her a ride. And she quickly warmed to the steady flow of exquisite heat through the car vents, and the warm leather beneath her. She glanced over at the switch near his parking brake. Seat warmers. Oh, of course. She glanced at his profile and realized just how amazing his chin was. She hadn't noticed just how rugged and strong he seemed. How his features perfectly aligned with everything on his face. From his leather jacket that was open, and how he could just see the slope of stout neck. She was struck by the sudden urge to unfasten her seatbelt and slide into his lap, straddle him right there in the middle of traffic. What was wrong with her? It was like the angrier she was at the man, the more she wanted to have sex with him. Jack's, case in point. The more he hurt her, seemingly the sexier he became. Same with Jack. It'd be a great case of therapy, she thought. You don't have to drive me all the way home. Just to the one stop would be fine. She was glad her voice came out neutral and professional sounding. She was having trouble focusing with Jack so close. His right hand on the stick shift inches from her knee. She remembered exactly how those strong, expert hands had felt on her body. The memory sent shivers of anticipation through her. Anticipation that she quickly tried to quash. There'd be no jumping into a boss with, well, for a second time anyway. I'm not going to drop you off at the train, he said. You don't have to drive me home, really, it's just... Oh, I don't plan to take you home either. A devilish grin pulled up at the corners of his mouth, as she remembered so well kissing her right in the night before. Where are you taking me? Well, out to dinner.